Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 8th of February. I'm Councillor Sherry Jesperson, and I'm chair of this committee. Committee members with us today are councillors Tim Cook, Matt Hall, Brian Heatley, Carol Jones, Stella Jones, Mary Penfold, Val Pothecary, and Belinda Rideout. We have a marvellous array of Dorset Council officers with us for various parts of the meeting today, and they are Mike Garrity, Head of Planning, Hannah Smith, Area Planning Manager, Robert Lennis, Planning Area Lead. We have Senior Planning Officers Simon Sharp, Verity Murphy, and Emily Jones. Steve Savage is the Highways Transport Development Manager. Hannah Massey is our solicitor. And George Dare and Megan Rochester are providing the Democratic Services support for us today. George, congratulations. I understand that you are newly promoted to Senior Democratic Services Officer, so well done. And a particular welcome to Megan, because this is her first meeting with us as a Democratic Services support. Lee Johnson, Judy Saunders and Lillian Board will be producing the meeting during the course of the day, and the representations will be read by Nicola Holdsworth. There we are. Now, members, we've got a full day agenda today, so we will break for lunch on completion of agenda item 7, the first Charlton Marshall application, and reconvene at 2 o'clock. We can, as always, pause for a short break during the course of the morning for a comfort break at an appropriate place in the agenda. So for the benefit of those listeners listening at home, as the BBC likes to say, a word about our procedures. So for each application, I will invite the case officer to present their report and recommendations, followed by presentations from other officers. Members of the public have been invited to submit written representations, which have all been seen by committee members. Up to 3 submissions in support and 3 against may be read to the meeting by a council officer. Any submissions from the town or parish council will be read. The ward member may address the committee, and finally the applicant's submission is heard. Following these representations, committee members will ask any questions for clarification on the representations or the presentations. Then the committee will move to discussion and will deliberate and come to a view. So in line with Dorset Council's COVID protocols for virtual meetings, I will now outline our procedures for what I hope is the very last time, and that by next time we meet, we will be live and in the room. So for today's meeting, members will express a minded to decision in respect of the recommendations as set out in the officers' reports. The decision will be taken then by under delegated authority by Mike Garrity, Head of Planning, who will bear in mind the minded to decision made by members. So enough preamble, let's get on with our agenda. Can we have apologies? Megan, are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman. So we have apologies from councillors Les Fry, Emma Parker, John Andrews and Jane Somper. And then we also have apologies for the afternoon session from councillor Stella Jones.
Lovely, thank you very much. Members, do any of you have a declaration of interest you need to make in any of these items before us today? I'm seeing nothing coming up. As always, if anything occurs to you during the course of the meeting, just sing out. Public participation I've covered. So our first application of the day then. Members, this is an application for 80 dwellings at Common Mead Lade in Gillingham. This is an outline application to consider access. Now you'll remember this site because we refused an application here as recently as August 2021, and this new application seeks to address some of the issues which we had with the previous plan. So Verity Murphy, if you'd like to make your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Can you see my screen, Chair?
I can.
Okay, so as already stated, this application is for the erection of 80 dwelling houses at land north of Commonmead Lane. It is an outline application to determine access only. The application site is shown in red on the location plan. The blue line to the north shows the land in the same ownership. This area in blue will be incorporated into the development for biodiversity improvements and open space, but I will go into more detail on that later on in the presentation. On the right, we have the wider context, so you can see the application site there. Gillingham is to the east, and it is important to note that the site is located just outside the settlement boundary of Gillingham. So in August 2021, committee refused a very similar application for 80 dwellings on the site. I'll go through the reasons briefly. These related to less than substantial harm on White Conservation Area and at the Moat at Thorngrove, and it wasn't considered that this harm would be outweighed by public benefits. The proposal would result in the loss of an existing informal green amenity space and a formal area of search for new outdoor sports provision, and there was no Section 106 to secure affordable housing and community benefits. Okay, so here we have an aerial view of the application site with key views across the site. Mellows Nursing Home is to the west of the site, south-southwest, and that is shown here on the aerial image. Okay, so this photograph shows the site access, which is off Commonmead Lane and runs to the east of Mellows Care Home, which is shown here. This top photograph is taken standing on where the new access track will be, looking north-northwest. This is the side elevation of the care home. The bottom photograph is standing in the southern section of the site, looking east to the residential dwellings in Freem Way. Okay, here are some more photographs. So the top one is taken standing in the middle of the site, looking southwards. Look, this is the care home here, and there are glimpses of Duncliffe Wood to the south. This bottom photograph is taken looking at the tree belt to the west of the site and towards the trees and hedgerows on the northern boundary. These photographs are taken in the western section of the site. You can see the care home here and the tree belt to the west. And this bottom image is looking eastwards to the residential developments on the edge of Gillingham. Here are some photographs looking north. You can see the hedgerow on the northern boundary, and there are also views to White Brewery and White Conservation Area beyond the northern field. Okay, so these drawings show the proposed access. So access to the site will be from Commonmead Lane. These drawings show that visibility displays of 2.4 by 43 metres can be provided on site. The highways engineers have reviewed the application and transport statement, and it's not considered that the cumulative impact of the development is severe. Okay, so this is the proposed illustrative master plan. This is the same as the refuse scheme. The proposed development is still for 80 dwellings on the site with access from the southeastern corner. The urban designer was consulted on the previously refused scheme, so their comments still stand. It is considered that 80 dwellings would fit comfortably on the site with the inclusion of a leap and a lap shown there. 25% of the houses will be affordable, and this will be secured through a Section 106 agreement. The most affected residents will be the properties adjoining immediately east of the south on a Freem Way, as shown here, and also to the south of the site at Mellows Care Home. This plan indicates that there is sufficient distance which will mitigate the impact and adequately protect the amenity of neighbouring residents. However, the final detailed layout proposals will be looked at more carefully through the subsequent reserved matters application. But it is considered overall that sufficient amenity space can be provided on the site. An archaeological investigation has been undertaken on the site, so 15 trenches were dug as shown on this plan. The overall significance of the archaeological interest was considered to be low. Okay, so to the north of the site is White Conservation Area. This is shown in purple. Number 25 on this map is the Moat at Thorngrove, which is a non-designated heritage asset. There will be less than substantial harm to the conservation area and to the moat at Thorngrove, but it is considered that the public benefits of this scheme, which are over and beyond that associated with the refuse scheme, would outweigh this harm. Okay, so the site is shown in the Gillingham neighbourhood plan as an area of search, so that's shown as C on this map. So it's an area for search for formal sports pitches. The area numbered 4 on the map is shown as privately owned green space. The application site is privately owned, therefore there is no guarantee that the site would ever be delivered as open space. And it is noted that the Town Council nor sports clubs have made any formal approaches to the landowner regarding such a use since the neighbourhood plan was made, so there are questions as to how deliverable the site would be for formal outdoor space. Under this application, there are significant additional benefits in relation to biodiversity and open space. So the orange areas on this image on the left will provide 4.3 hectares to the north of the site for enhanced species-rich grassland, and then there will be 0.48 hectares within the site, which will be species-rich grassland, and this will form a wildlife corridor. So overall, it's about 4.4 hectares, and these will result in a 10% biodiversity net gain on the site and will be secured via a Section 106 agreement. This was not proposed previously under the refuse scheme. The entire northern site shown in blue will be offered to Gillingham Town Council, and if accepted, the transfer would contain sufficient covenants to prevent any future development and to guarantee that this land is held as publicly accessible green space in perpetuity. This is also a significant additional benefit proposed under this resubmitted scheme. So looking at local plan policy, so policy 2 is the council's core spatial strategy and follows national planning policy, which seeks to focus significant development within the 4 main towns, with Gillingham being one of those. The site is located immediately adjacent of the settlement boundary. However, in policy terms, the site is within the countryside and development would normally be strictly controlled under policy 20. The site is also referenced in the emerging Dorset local plan, which states that the site is proposed for residential development. However, this can only be given limited weight at this time. So looking at housing land supply, Dorset Council can now demonstrate a 5.17-year housing land supply, which is a great improvement to previous years. However, it still fails the housing delivery test, so the presumption in favour of sustainable development still applies. This means that planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The application site isn't afforded the protections of paragraph 14 of the MPPF either, as the neighbourhood plan became part of the development plan more than 2 years ago. So I just wanted to go into the housing delivery test a bit further. So the government publishes an annual housing delivery test to assess how delivery rates over the past 3 years compare to targets. So this top table explains that a bit further. So if it's below 95%, an action plan is required. If it is below 85%, you need to add a 20% buffer. And if it's below 75%, the presumption in favour of sustainable development still applies. So the bottom table shows the figures for North Dorset, and as you can see, they are at 69%. So the presumption in favour of sustainable development still applies. Okay, so here we have a list of the proposed heads of terms for the Section 106 agreement. The same infrastructure is secured as the draft Section 106 for the refuse scheme, but this application will secure the additional heads of terms highlighted in yellow. So we've got the biodiversity net gain, the northern field to be offered to and transferred to Gillingham Town Council, and we have a payment towards compensatory habitat. So here is a summary of the planning balance, which is set out in the officer report. The site is outside a settlement boundary, however the presumption applies to this application. The site does not benefit from the protections of paragraph 14 of the NPPF. There are no adverse impacts which would significantly outweigh the benefits, no objections from statutory consultees, the significant public benefits of the scheme, which are significantly over and beyond that associated with the refuse scheme, would outweigh any less than substantial harm to heritage assets. And finally, it is considered that the site is within a sustainable location. So last slide is the conclusion, recommendation. So as stated, the presumption in favour applies. There are no adverse impacts that would outweigh the benefits. It would result in the provision of up to 80 new homes in a sustainable location close to a major town. There are significant economic and social benefits over and beyond that associated with the refuse scheme, and the Section 106 secures significant planning obligations. The recommendation is to grant, subject to Section 106 and conditions. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Verity. That was very clear. Steve Savage, would you like to give us the Highways take on this application when you're ready?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
well,
you.
As you've heard, the outline application proposes exactly the same access position and design as was previously agreed. It was, as you heard, refused permission by the committee, but not on highway safety grounds. The access itself will take the form of a priority junction from Commonmead Lane, which is classified as C108, with visibility displays which fully comply with the guidance given by Manual for Streets. And these sight lines will be provided on land either controlled by the applicant or over the adjacent public highway. There's no third-party land required. Now, there is sufficient intervisibility between the proposed access and the existing care home to the southwest, and this design aspect was considered by a Stage 1 road safety audit, which was prepared by independent auditors. There is a 2-metre wide footway connection from the new access, which will then link to the existing footway, which runs along the northern side of Commonmead Lane. Commonmead Lane itself stretches back into the Gillingham town centre, providing a continuous link to the town centre and its associated facilities. The application is supported by a transport statement that considers the likely highway impact of the proposal on the local highway network, and a development of this size, a residential development, is predicted to generate up to 39 two-way trips in the AM peak, which is between 8 and 9, and 36 two-way movements in the PM peak, which is between 5 and 8. Now, the applicant has looked at the likely trip distribution of the development traffic in the peak periods, and the modelling has indicated that 86% of vehicles are predicted to travel to or from the northeast along Commonmead Lane towards or from the Broad Robin junction to the north, which is the junction with the B3081. 14% of vehicles are anticipated to travel from the site to the southwest. There were comments made at the previous application regarding the suitability of the highway network to the southwest, but I think in perspective we have to look that during the busiest period, which is the AM peak, this would equate to 5 vehicle movements to or from the southwest. So the accepted conclusion is that these trips will be likely to have a negligible impact on the highway network. And as you've just heard from the case officer, Madam Chair, the Highway Authority considers that the residual cumulative impact of the development cannot be thought to be severe when consideration is given to paragraphs 110 and 111 of the MPPF, and has consequently recommended conditional approval. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. That's very clear indeed. So now we are to hear from three objectors, the Town Council and the agent. So Nicola Holdsworth, if you're ready, you can start your first reading marathon of the day.
Thank you. Okay, this is from Malcolm Briggs against the application. I object to the proposed development of land to the north of Common Mead Lane and contend this is not a proper application, which should either be an appeal or a full submission of a proposal, rather than this attempt to deal with the reasons for previous refusal as if they were reserved matters. The developers themselves admit it is a resubmission of the original proposal, in which case it should be refused in the same way, or the council could leave itself open to a claim of abuse of process and inevitably calls for a judicial review. The only real difference between this application and the previous one that was refused is the inclusion of an additional field, which the developers say they will leave. This is not included in the original proposal or the indicative plans, and therefore cannot now be considered as part of this application. The promise is neither practical nor subsequently enforceable and will lead to creeping development across the fields until it reaches the White Conservation Area. The proposals fly in the face of very many policies in the neighbourhood plan, which identifies this land as informal recreation or accessible natural green space. It is also not suitable to be considered under paragraph 11D of the planning framework, presumed approval for sustainable development, as it falls on all three criteria. 1, there is a robust neighbourhood plan which was only adopted by county in July 2018 and not 2010 as stated by the applicants in their addendum currently being reviewed. 2, there is a 91% identified housing supply for the next 10 years. 3, the site is not sustainable on the grounds of there being no public transport. The reasons why this application should be refused are very similar to the 2021 Stourbridge appeal, which was also refused, and this gives a clear indication on how ribbon development in rural areas should be assessed. This appeal dismissed the same stated benefits, including Section 106 monies and increased council tax, as being of no distinct benefit. Stourbridge has a much lower achievement of identified housing supply, and yet this was not held to be a sufficient reason for suburban sprawl. This is a much loved open green space which people really use. We estimate there are 50,000 visits a year to it, and it has represented the westernmost boundary of the township for 40 years. A development that will involve hundreds of additional vehicle movements a day has no place here, and we implore the committee to reject the application again and wait for the applicants to appeal, which we believe they would lose based on the Stourbridge appeal. This is Philip Walker against the application. I object to the above proposed development. Existing planning policies. The proposed development is for a high density housing estate outside the settlement boundary. It is a greenfield site and is subject to countryside policies where development should be strictly controlled. In addition, part of the site situated within an area designated as an important open or wooded area. Design appearance and density of proposed development. 80 proposed dwellings will exceed the height and massing of neighbouring buildings and doesn't respect the character and distinctiveness of the locality. It is more appropriate for a town centre suburban location. It does not provide any new green infrastructure to improve the quality of life for residents. Traffic issues. The site is where Common Mead Lane narrows to a single track lane. The lane is in poor condition. After rain, excess water travels directly down the lane, becoming icy in winter conditions. In addition to cars, the road is used by walkers, cyclists and horse riders. This road cannot take additional traffic from 80 households without substantial investment. Infrastructure and other housing developments. There are three other development programmes which meet Gillingham's contribution to new housing in Dorset. Barnaby Mead, which is nearing completion, redevelopment of the old co-op site, and the southern extension, 1,800 houses, some of which are already advertised for sale. Unlike at the southern extension, Fairfax have no plan for infrastructure. Impact on ecology and biodiversity. Fairfax's biodiversity plan recorded 6 different species of bat during activity surveys at the site, including serotine bats, which have a vulnerable conservation status in England. Other protected species identified were great crested newts. In addition, other reptiles, badgers, hedgehogs, barn owls, nesting birds are all to be found in the field area, as reported by Fairfax themselves, plus deer have been seen. The success of the mitigation proposals and habitat creation scheme put forward by Fairfax cannot be guaranteed. The process of creating a building site of such a size over many months will inevitably have a catastrophic impact on the local ecology. Climate change. Dorset Council has already declared a climate emergency. Disturbing a large grassland area will undermine the government's emissions target, as disturbance of fields releases carbon back into the atmosphere. A report in Dorset Wildlife magazine states the following: UK grasslands store 2 billion tonnes of carbon, but disturbance of soils releases millions of tonnes each year. More information is available in a joint report by the WWF and RSPB, the role of nature in the UK NDC. Sarah English, against the application. I strongly object to the above application and believe it should be refused on the following grounds. The proposed housing development is outside the defined settlement boundary of Gillingham. It is on a greenfield site and impinges on the White Conservation Area. The proposal is contrary to policies 2520 of the adopted North Dorset Plan Part 1 and paras 11, 202 and 203 of the MPPF. There is no obvious overriding public benefit to be derived from building a large housing development of 80 homes or more on this site. The proposed Common Mead Lane site is unsuitable and unsustainable for housing development of this kind. The only local amenities with the acceptable 400 metres to 1 kilometre distance from the site is a bus stop, where apparently no buses stop, and a local convenience store. Fairfax's own transport assessment estimates that there would be an extra 392 trips within a 12-hour period to and from the housing site. If this figure is added to the number of trips currently made to and from the Mellows care home, according to the transport assessment, the total would reach 501 trips over a 12-hour period. This extra volume of traffic travelling daily along Common Mead Lane and trying to turn left or right into the busy Wyke Road would result in increased traffic congestion, increased traffic pollution, and may well create an accident black spot at the Common Mead Lane Broad Robin junction into the busy Wyke Road, as all this extra traffic tries to turn right or left onto the busy Wyke Road. There is a traffic flow where the traffic flow is almost continual. Also, the proposed access road leading into and out of the housing development is very close to the point where Common Mead Lane becomes narrow, windy, single track land with poor visibility and relatively few passing places. The proposed development would result in the loss of informal recreation area, which also provides easy access to open countryside and a green space where outdoor sports can be played, and is specifically contrary to policies 17 and 6 of the Gillingham Neighbourhood Plan adopted in July 2018. There is no need for more housing developments in Gillingham. Gillingham is one of the fastest growing towns in the southwest, with 2 other housing developments in progress, Barnaby Mead and the planned southern extension, 1,800 houses. Housing quotas on this town are already well on target for 2032. This one's from Gillingham Town Council. Gillingham Town Council recommends refusal of planning application, and that's 2021-04019, for the following reasons. The site is outside the settlement boundary and encroachment into the countryside would cause harm to the significance of the White Conservation Area and the non-designated moat at Thorngrove. The harm would not be outweighed by the benefits derived from the development and is contrary to policies 2.5.20 of the North Dorset Local Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Gillingham has a decifit of 86.5 acres of amenity green space. The development would result in a loss of an existing area of informal greens amenity space and a formal area of search for new outdoor sports provision, and is contrary to policies 15 of the NDLP and policies 17 and 22 of the Gillingham Neighbourhood Plan and paragraph 98 and 99 of the MPPF. The application suggests that formal outdoor sports and informal indoor space can be provided for through Section 106 funding. How can this be achieved when the land allocated in the neighbourhood plan for sports provision is developed for housing? There are no other suitable areas in Gillingham on which to provide much needed amenity land. The site is served by a substandard rural lane, which is single carriageway width with no footways or usable highway verges. The lane is well used by residents of Mulberry Court and the service users of Employ Mobility, many of whom use mobility scooters. Additional vehicle movements will adversely impact upon the safety of highway users, rendering the application unsustainable. The transport assessment submitted by the applicant is flawed, being based on estimated traffic movements using the 2011 census, which is now 11 years out of date. The vehicle movement assessment was undertaken in November 2020, whilst the UK was in lockdown and traffic movements restricted. There is no public transport available. Occupants will be reliant on private vehicles, which is not sustainable and contrary to the MPPF. The development will result in the loss of amenity to neighbouring residential care home, which is contrary to policy 25 of the NDLP. At least 6 different species of bats were recorded during the surveys, including the vulnerable serotine bat. The Ecology survey confirms the presence of great crested newts and states that the development will result in the destruction of their terrestrial habitat. This adverse effect on ecology and biodiversity cannot be mitigated against. The MPPF states that the purpose of the planning system is to contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. The proposed development does not meet the objectives of the MPPF, and the harm caused by the application significantly outweighs the benefits. And this is Nicole Stacey. She's from the planning agents. On behalf of the applicants, I endorse your officer's recommendation for approval of this outline application. The application is a resubmission of an earlier application discussed at committee in August last year. This application has sought to address the matters raised by members, which ultimately formed the reasons for refusal of the earlier application. The Council's Conservation Officer agrees with the applicant's heritage impact assessment and considers that the impact of the proposals to nearby heritage assets equate to less than substantial harm, and the public benefits of the scheme substantially outweigh any harm. With regards to loss of open space, the site is privately owned. Whilst there are existing public rights of way through the site, this is not a designated area of open space, public open space. The site is identified in the neighbourhood plan as one of a number of areas of search for potential outdoor sports provision. Pre-application discussions held with the Town Council confirmed that no further work had been undertaken in relation to such sites, and no use of the land for sports provision had been identified. Neither the Town Council nor sports clubs have made any formal approaches to the landowner regarding such a use since the neighbourhood plan was made. The Town Council did express an interest in securing more informal public amenity space. The applicants have offered the land to the north of the application site, extending to 8 hectares, which was previously intended to be retained by the landowner, to be transferred to the Town Council for this purpose, and this forms part of the Section 106 heads of terms. This would ensure the land remains as open space in perpetuity. The Council has confirmed that the agreed Section 106 contributions are sufficient for the ongoing maintenance of this land, should the Town Council accept the offer to transfer. The latest housing delivery test found that the delivery was 69% of the requirement over the last 3 years. The presumption in favour of development therefore applies. This site has been identified by the Council as an allocation for residential development in the emerging Dorset local plan. We are therefore strongly of the view that there are no adverse impacts associated with the scheme which outweigh the range of substantial benefits, which include provision of 20 much needed affordable homes, creation and support of local jobs, biodiversity enhancements, provision of open space and play, including a substantial area of adjacent land to the north, which is offered for public recreation enjoyment, financial contributions towards enhanced community infrastructure, including healthcare, education, libraries, sports provision and local bus services. We therefore hope you support your officer's recommendation to approve this outline application. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Nicola. That's your first round of reading over for the day. It's now time, members, to ask questions for clarification on the presentations or on the representations. The first question is coming from Councillor.
Good morning, Chairman. I think you froze there, actually.
I did for a minute. Yes, I did for a minute, but I was just, you hadn't started. So if you would start again, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's regarding the ecology of the site, actually. In the update sheet that we received recently, we had lots of information about Great Crested Newt strategy. We've heard an awful lot about bats, actually, and I'm concerned about the serotine bats. Could you tell me, please, if any mitigation measures have been suggested or organised to look after them? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so our NET team have been involved with the application. Now, there's no objection to the principle of the development subject to conditions. In terms of BAT, there will be a landscape and ecological management plan as a condition if the application is granted, and that will require the applicant to provide additional information on the creation and management and provisions of species-specific enhancement on the site, and bats will be provided for in this. The application site also proposes a wildlife corridor, which will provide foraging habitat for bats, badgers, all sorts of reptiles. And the proposal will also include bat tubes within the new buildings. So there's a wide range of mitigation and enhancement measurements for biodiversity on the site.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pothridge, does that answer your question?
I was just going to ask if I could ask a supplementary.
Yes, carry on.
Thank you. That does sound a bit general, actually, and I understand. I have to say I know absolutely nothing about bats, but I do understand that these serotine bats are need to be protected. They have been identified as very special species, and I think to lump them in with the general policy might not be quite good enough. It's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Verity, serotine bats needing extra care.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the LEMP condition requires additional assessments to be made, and obviously we'll give great detail to bats and all the different types of bats in that. I think that would be sufficient enough on the site. It will all be looked at in detail. Our net team have looked at it and don't have any objection in principle. We have got the conditions, so we can look at it in more detail. We have got the wildlife areas which will be provided for in the section 106, which will also help this. So I don't think there's anything extra that we would need for the serotonin bats on the site.
Councillor Apothecary, would it help if we were to put in our minutes that we would like particular in the work that's yet to be done, we would like particular attention to be paid to this particular species of bat? Would that help? Then we've just flagged it up.
Yes, please, Chairman. I think they warrant special treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we make sure that that's in our minutes, just as a reminder to all concerned that we are lucky enough to have these very special bats, and that's our responsibility. Good. Anything else, Councillor Apothecary? No, good. Councillor Mary Penfold.
No further questions. Sorry, Chairman.
That's all right. Councillor Mary Penfold, do you have a question?
Thank you very much. Well, it's actually almost identical to what Councillor Apothecary has said. I just wondered if somebody could enlighten me about the compensatory habitat, because obviously that doesn't only include bats, it will include the newts and things like that, and how that's going to actually be enforced more than anything. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Verity, compensatory habitats, and in particular how it's going to be enforced.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got the enhanced habitat in the northern section of the site, which will be kept as biodiversity areas, biodiversity wildlife areas. That will be secured through a section 106 agreement, and also the wildlife corridors and habitat creation in the southern section of the site will also be secured through the section 106 agreement. So it's quite robust.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Happy with that, Mary?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Heatley, is yours a question or a comment?
It's a question.
Go ahead, please.
And I think it's a question for our solicitor present.
Yes.
When I saw this application to begin with, I thought the way we will approach it is look at the 3 objections that we had to the proposal last time and see how far this new application mitigated them, and on that basis we decide whether we felt better about it or not. One of the public representations by Mr. Malcolm Bridge kind of suggested that this was an abuse of process and that we might lay ourselves open to judicial review. I'd like some reassurance from our solicitor that is probably wrong, but I do think we need to know. Thank you.
That's a very good question, just to reassure the committee. Solicitor Hannah Massey, could I ask you to come in and address that question, and then I might allow Mike Garrity if he wants to comment second. So could we have some comment and reassurance that we're addressing this in the correct way? Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is to be determined on its own merits. So the appeal which is underway to the application which is refused is not a material consideration. And so members must judge this application on its own merits.
Yeah, that's very helpful, thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Heatley? That's Mike. Let me bring Mike Garrity in, because he's flashed up on my screen, and then I'll come back to you, right, Mike.
Yep, thank you,
Chairman.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just to echo Hannah's comments there, it is a fresh application before us. We consider it on its merits. Hannah did mention the appeal against the refused scheme. So just for members' awareness, the appeal is against the scheme as was refused, not against this current application which is before you. So the additional benefits that are on offer in this application that have been presented in the report are specifically to do with the current application you are considering, not the one that is actually lodged for appeal. But we have to consider this application specifically on its merits. But Councillor Heatley has raised an important issue as far as the reasons for refusal, because we have to consider whether or not we're satisfied that the presumption in favour of sustainable development and the benefits that are on offer here outweigh some of those issues that were raised, and the report sets that balancing act out for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian, are you happy with that?
Well, I think that means that if we think the reasons against this proposal this time round are, apart from the modifications, substantially the same ones as they were last time, we are reasonably safe in mainly looking at the objections we made earlier. But I think I'm reassured. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, essentially what we have is we have to consider this as this is a new proposal before us, and we consider it on its merits, and it's either acceptable to us or it's not. And the fact that there are that we've seen a previous one and that one's under appeal is not a planning consideration for us today. It's information that you are now appraised of, but it isn't to influence our decision today. So we either will find this acceptable at the end of the day, or we won't. That's the planning balance that's before us. So Councillor Cook, is yours a question, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is.
Off you
it's
go.
to seek some clarification as to the housing supply figures versus the housing delivery test. My understanding was that when we did not have we could not demonstrate a housing land supply over 5 years or up to 5 years, then that put the presumption of development in favour of acceptance. Now that test, as Verity has very clearly set out, we have now a 5.17 housing land supply housing land supply. Could I ask why we are now being subjected to the housing delivery test, please? Because it seems that once we've met one target, then a different target comes in, which puts us back exactly in the same position, i.e. the presumption in favour of development that we were in before.
Okay, thank you. This was covered extensively in the report and in the presentation, but Hannah Smith, I see you there. Would you like to come in and very briefly tell us again why the presumption in favour of sustainable development still stands? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for raising the question, Councillor. It's not a new test. There's always been both tests. So the government tests against the housing land supply, so available sites, and also delivery of housing. So it's two tests that we always have to be on top of, unfortunately. So really good news about the land supply for the North Dorset, former North Dorset area being over 5 years now. It's excellent. The delivery hasn't been quite so good because it's taken some time for our larger sites to get going, which it is picking up now. So the delivery test, the housing delivery test, as Verity really carefully explained, is below the required amount for not having to apply the presumption. So it's dropped below 75%. And that means in accordance with the NPPF, we still have to apply the presumption unless there's a specific reason that indicates we shouldn't, like a footnote issue. Or there's demonstrable harm that would outweigh the benefits. So exactly the same, pretty much, as what we were doing before with the housing land supply issue.
Thank you very much. I hope that Clear now?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very
That
much.
explains it exactly. Thank you.
We are
Thank you.
moving in the right direction, but we're not there yet. I think that's safe to say. Councillor Rideout, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd just like a bit more clarity on the northern field, the 8.05 hectare, to be offered to and transferred, if acceptable, to the Gillingham Town Council. Can I just ask for clarity on, is there a financial sum to go to the Town Council? I think it was mentioned in the agent's representation that the Town Council were happy with the with the sum for onward maintenance of the site. And also, what happens if the Town Council do not accept it? What happens to that field, in particular the eastern section? Thank you.
Thank you. If I address your second point first, so if the Town Council do not accept the transfer of land, the the whole field would remain in private ownership, and there wouldn't be the covenants on that eastern section to prevent it from being developed in the future. However, we would still have the biodiversity section and the left-hand portion of the field, so that would still be retained. In terms of your question regarding sums of money, I don't have that information to hand, I'm afraid. I can have a look and get back to you on that, but I don't have that information with me right at this moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I just follow up with a supplementary to that? This is, and I know this is covered in your report, but this was raised by a couple of the submissions that we've heard. So the suggestion that the concern that this might not be, I think the phrase in one letter was enforceable and in another letter was guaranteed. Can you just clarify and reassure the people listening and the committee that this arrangement is under the section 106 and therefore, if agreed, it is enforceable and guaranteed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it is included in the section 106. We've got those heads of terms securing the northern field. We've got the 4.3 hectares in the northern field for biodiversity. We've got the transfer if Gillingham Town Council would like to do so as a heads of term, and also that will contain the covenant to prevent any future development on the site and to maintain it as open green space in perpetuity. So it will all be secured in the section 106 agreement.
That's very helpful. So that's just so people get, this is not a wish list. This is a section 106 agreement. So it's more firm. If we agree it will happen. Hannah, your screen is on. Did you want to comment, please?
Just quickly on the points on the really good questions that are raised. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it would be binding, as Verity has just explained, because it would be contained in the 106. So what we normally do is we have a clause that has to be offered in the first instance to the Town Council, so they have first offer of refusal on the land. If they decided they didn't want the land, then there'd have to be a mechanism in the 106 for it to revert to a management company, which would be a privately run arrangement. So we could still secure the benefits either way, but having it transferred to a public body obviously has the additional benefit of it being in public ownership. But the transfer to the Town Council isn't necessary to still secure those benefits. So just make that point. So it's robust either way, and it can be binding. That would be sort of set out in the details of the 106. Just going back to the question about ongoing maintenance, there isn't a maintenance sum identified in the heads of terms. It isn't one of the heads of terms that's been included in the report. But if members felt that a contribution towards maintenance was required, that is something that could be considered in the heads of terms. It has to be reasonable and related and pass all the tests to be included in the 106, but it is something that we do include on 106 agreements. I think in this context, it is a large area that's being offered for public ownership. So what that maintenance might involve would be down to negotiation. But just to come back on that point, it's not actually included in the heads of terms at present that there be a maintenance contribution to address Councillor Rideout's question.
That's very helpful. So members, I think we might hold that thought, because that might well be something we want to come back to if we do decide that we would like this application to proceed. Councillor Stella Jones, is yours a question or a comment?
It's a question about public footpaths.
Lovely, off you go.
Obviously, the public footpaths that are registered have to be maintained or diverted. But are there any informal footpaths or permissive footpaths across this land which would benefit people if we were included in the application?
Verity, footpath.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be helpful if I get the plan back. I'm just going to reshare my screen with you a second. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, so we have the existing footpath connections to the east of the site with Freemway there, and then we have the existing footpath to the west of the site maintained. In terms of, so that would allow people to walk across the site. Sorry, I don't think I've answered your question very well. What was the question again? Sorry, Chair.
Are there any informal footpaths at the moment which we ought to include in the site, or permissive paths that people use at the moment?
Yes.
They've not actually been registered.
I'm not sure, Chair. I might have to defer to Hannah for some help with that question.
Hannah, do we know of any, Hannah Smith, do we know of any permissive paths? We have the 2 footpaths here shown. Any permissive paths?
I'm not aware of any additional sort of permissive paths that are used by people that aren't formal public rights of way. I think we've pretty much focused on the fact there will be connectivity through the site because of the public rights of way network. But thank you for the question, Councillor. But yeah, we're not aware of any that would be stopped. There would still be access through the site as a result of this development. There may be informal ways that people walk across the site because people might not stick to the footpaths, yes. But I'm not aware of any ones that any sort of prejudice in that respect.
Will there be access, footpath access from this site to the field, adjacent field that's going to be public open space?
Thank you, Chair. There is already a connection between the northern and the southern field through sort of an informal cutting through a hedgerow, and there's no plan to close that up, so there would still be some access between the two.
That's helpful to know, because obviously children and families, it would be good if they didn't have to go out onto the road to get to their neighbouring open space. That's good. Does that answer your question, Councillor Jones?
Yes, I'm just concerned we ought to encourage more people to do walking, and
we should indeed. Yes, thank you very much. I think we're done with questions, and I thank you very much, members. We're now moving on to comment, and I'd like to invite Carol Jones to make a comment to begin the discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair. I remember we debated on this for quite some time at the August meeting, and whilst we are very conscious of all the public objections, and you can understand that, you know, they really have had a lot of house building in the area, and this is a special place, but the developers have addressed the concerns we had directly. And I remember we were very disappointed at the time, to say the least, really, that there was no affordable content within the application, and that has now been addressed quite satisfactorily. And I also remember we were looking at how we could safeguard that extra piece of land, which now looks as though it can be safeguarded. I would hope that the town council would accept it, but if not, if it could be safeguarded into a management committee, just so that it is safe in the longer term, so that the worries of constant sprawl cannot take place. And I also would like to see something considered in terms of perhaps some ongoing maintenance, should the town council or the management committee take the land over, that there could be some sort of maintenance, perhaps even for the first 3 years. But otherwise, Chair, I see really no reasons for refusal on this proposal. And as much as I'm sorry for the objectors, but I would be happy to propose this if there is a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and that you're proposing with an additional condition that we include some maintenance in the section 106 to be negotiated.
Yes, but either with the town council or the management committee, so that we're just safe in either way.
Good, thank you very much. I will now move on to Councillor Apothecary and then Councillor Rideout to comment before I call for a seconder, because they're the local members. Councillor Apothecary first.
Thank you, Chairman. Contrary to Carol's suggestion, the fact remains that we have 134 letters of support for the neighbourhood plan and objection to the proposed development. Our officer states in the report that development within the countryside should be strictly controlled unless it's required to enable essential housing needs to be met. The development is contrary to policies of the local plan and the NPPF and is not essential for rural needs. The site's identification as suitable for 72 dwellings in the 2019 SHLA and the emerging local plan does not constitute planning policy or formal site allocation, and in my opinion should be given no weight. At this application for outline development, it's the very principle of this development that I have a problem with. There is no material difference in the application, only in the S106 agreement. I would like to propose refusal of this application for the same reasons as last time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've already had a proposer to in support, so that we'll have to go there first. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, on balance, my thoughts on this are much the same as the last time it came to this committee. Is the impact on the heritage, the landscape character. The White Conservation Areas is quite an elevated site, and there will still be views to be seen of this development as you look through from the conservation area, and of course the Thorngrove area. It's going to spoil the enjoyment of the 2 footpaths across the site. Obviously, the density for me is far too high. It's bringing the urban right to the edge of the countryside, and it doesn't really respect the character of the locality. And as Councillor Apothecary alluded to, the North Dorset District Council 2019 SHLA identified potential viability for around 72 dwellings. And we've heard it's contrary to local plan policies, the Gillingham neighbourhood plan policies, and also the destruction of great crested newts, their terrestrial habitat, which I find very sad on the biodiversity front. However, this application brings more benefit to the community in the fact that the northern field will be offered to the Gillingham Town Council, and we've heard that we can secure the maintenance going forward. It's bringing through 10% biodiversity gain, the affordable housing, the climate change, sustainability measures within the proposal, and as we've heard, so it's providing an area for amenity space for the community in perpetuity, albeit it's a different field than what the community wanted in the first place. But I have a dilemma. My dilemma is if, as we know, the first application's gone to appeal. If we refuse this application today and the applicants win the appeal on the original application, then we're going to lose these benefits altogether for the community, and that's my dilemma. So, Chairman, I think I've still got a bit of thinking to do here. Thank you.
You have indeed, and
yeah.
And you're absolutely right, Councillor, that while the other appeal is not a material planning consideration for us today, it nonetheless is it's there, and it's a fact that we are cognizant of, and it's hard to ignore it. So you're quite right. That's the dilemma in a nutshell. Councillor Heatley, you wanted to comment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very conscious that we are in tilted balance territory here. If it were not for the tilted balance, I would oppose this just on the grounds that we cannot just ignore neighbourhood plans and build on land that is not allocated to housing. But we are in tilted balance territory, and I think that it is no longer the case that of the objections we made last time, the only one that really survives is the one about the effect on the conservation area. And I think alone that is not enough to outweigh the presumption that we accept this. I've also noticed that this has got, as I think it was Councillor Pothecary said, there's a good set of climate stuff on page 20 in this, and I look forward to the details of that coming forward if we approve it and we get to the reserve matters stage. So rather reluctantly, because I don't like being in tilted balance territory, I'd like to second that we accept this.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Heatley, can I just confirm that are you seconding it as proposed with the extra condition that there should be a contribution towards the maintenance of the open space included in the section 106, subject to negotiation? Yes. So we've had a proposer and a seconder. Does anyone else have anything further to comment? And if not, we will put this to the vote. I'm not seeing any further. I don't want to rush you, but I'm not seeing any further comments coming through.
Sorry, Chair, it's Hannah Massey here. It's just a further point of clarification on this vote that we've got obviously two recommendations in the officer's report, as we have the 106. So we'll be voting on both recommendation A and B, and there was some further updated conditions on the update sheet that was circulated to members.
There were indeed, yes. So we're voting on the further conditions that were in the update sheet and the condition we just added today for some maintenance funding. Hannah Smith, could I just ask you to give us some wording for the condition that we've added today, so that we've got that? We're wanting a contribution towards maintenance of the open space, whether or not it's the town council or a management company, to be included in the section 106, and the amounts to be negotiated by we delegate to officers to negotiate.
That's correct. Yeah, it doesn't need to be a full condition because it will be contained in the section 106. So the additional heads of term would include the requirement for a maintenance contribution to be negotiated. If it went to a management company, there wouldn't be the requirement for a maintenance contribution because that would be dealt with by the management company. So I think what you've already explained would be sufficient for us to take that forward, Chair. Thank you.
So just to clarify my that I expressed it badly, this is an addition to the heads of terms of section 106, not an extra condition. We'll get there in the end. I think we're there.
Chair, apologies, Chair, could I just make one point on Councillor Heatley's last comments, which were very well put, thank you. It's just the fact that the tilted balance doesn't come into play unless the heritage harm can be outweighed by public benefit. So that's the first test that members have to direct their attention to. So I think that's what Councillor Heatley was getting to, was the point that there is harm still to the conservation area and its setting. In terms of its setting, but the public benefits could outweigh that harm if members felt that. Then, if that's the case, you then go on to the tilted balance as Councillor Heatley's rightly explained. It's just a slight technical, that the presumption doesn't automatically apply when there's a footnote issue such as that.
No, good. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm sure that's what I really meant to say.
It was what I understood you to say. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Look, it's really important that we get these things correctly. I think we're now ready to go to a vote, ladies and gentlemen. What I would like you to do, please, is when I call your name, confirm that you have been present throughout and heard the debate, and whether you are for or against the recommendations as laid out. with the additional section 106 and the additional condition in the update sheet. Councillor Cook.
Yes, thank you. I was present for the whole of the debate. I would like to vote against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall.
Present, heard it all and voting against.
Councillor Heatley. Brian Heatley. Councillor Heatley has met.
Yes, sorry, I
right.
muted myself.
Yes.
I have been present throughout. I've heard the debate and I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Jones.
Yes, present throughout, and I've heard the debate and I'm voting for.
Councillor Stella Jones.
Present throughout, I voted against.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Penfold.
Present throughout and voting for. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Val Pothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been present throughout and I'm against.
And Councillor Rideout.
Oh dear, this is a very tricky one for me. I'm going to vote for.
Right, thank you. I make that. Somebody else doing the counting?
Yes, I can confirm that there is 4 votes for the proposal and 4 votes against the proposal. So it's your decision, Chair.
Right, that's well, I have listened very carefully to the debate and I know this site very well personally, but I am aware of the possible appeal lurking in the background, and so on balance I'm going to vote for the officer's recommendation, but doing that in the full knowledge that this will that there's a lot of local objection. I can only apologise for that, but I will be voting for. Thank you. So that is then carried. Thank you very much.
Chair, we need to go to Mike.
Yes, of course we do. I always forget that bit. We now go to Mike Garrity, the head of planning. You've heard our minded 2 decision. Would you like to give us your decision, please, Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I can confirm that I have taken the officer's presentation, representations and the committee's minded 2 decision into account. My decision is that the application will be granted subject to the completion of the section 106 agreement and on the provision that it's completed within the time frame set out in the recommendation in the report, and subject to the additional additions that the committee minded 2 wanted on the heads of terms, and also the conditions that were put forward in the update sheet that was circulated. So I hope that makes sense, but it's to confirm the decision. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Good. Members, we've reached a natural break. Would you like to have a 5-minute comfort break now, or shall we wait until do one more application and move on? Let's see. I'm for doing one more application, move on. Any objections to that suggestion quickly in the? No, I'm seeing nothing. Right, we will take the next application, ladies and gentlemen, and this is for 55 dwellings at Higher Blandford Road, Cannes. This is a reserved matters application following the grant of outline planning permission at appeal. These appeals do haunt us, don't they? There's a long planning history on this site, which some of us from the previous North Dorset District Council days will know. So I'm going to ask Robert Lennis to present his report. Robert, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair. Can you hear me fine?
Not very well. I can just about hear you.
I'll move a bit closer and speak a bit louder.
If you would, that's a little better. Thank you very much.
Better?
I know.
You'll have to turn your microphones or your headphones up as much as possible, and I'll do my best to shout.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm about to share my screen with you so you can see the proposal.
I can see it. Thank you.
Can you see that now?
Yes, we can see it.
Right. So as you said, the proposal has outline permission. So the principle of development has been accepted for this site to erect up to 55, erect 55 dwellings. And this application provides us details of landscape, appearance, scale, and access. Here's the site for those of you who are not familiar with it, the red line of the site.
We're not seeing any plans, Robert. I've
Right,
just
then.
got the application up, so
Give me a second here.
thank you. When I said I could see your plans, now we have plans. That's excellent. Thank you.
That better?
Yeah, that's grand.
This is not quite what I was expecting. Give me just a moment, please.
Yes, indeed.
Do you still see that plan there, the location plan?
Yes, with the site outlined in red.
So this is the location plan, and this is an aerial photograph. Can you see that, please?
Yes, yes, lovely.
Okay, so we're on track. As you can see, it is an edge of development, and the constraints of the site, broadly speaking, you have an employment allocation to the east, and there are no conservation areas nearby. There is one listed building in this area here called Mayo Farm, but as you'll see from other drawings, it doesn't affect the development in design terms because it's so far away from it. That would be down here. This is the illustrative layout that the inspector had considered and made reference to in their comments. The layout was conceived having regard to views across the site down to Melbury Beacon, and you can see my cursor here following some lines, dotted lines, and there are also some views out on the southern part of the site. So this is the direction that the applicant took in creating their layout for the site. So this is what is proposed. And this plan shows you the tenure, the affordable housing. We'll be delivering 17 affordable houses intermixed throughout the site. The colors for the affordable housing are yellow and purple, and you can see that they're mixed fairly well through the site. The scale of the development is another matter to be considered. Having regard to the residential aspects, it is a 2-story, primarily with ancillary buildings like garages being a 1-story in height. This plan shows you the boundary treatments that are being proposed, and I'm going to try to zoom in on the legend so you can see a bit more detail. Did that zoom in a bit for you? Chair, did you see that zoomed in a little?
Yes, thank you very much. We can see
so
that.
you can see down here in the legend,
yes.
All the roof tiles we've agreed with the applicant to be a muted color of gray, so they don't stand out when viewed from afar, particularly the Cranbourne Chase AONB, which is to the east of the site. And we have achieved, through negotiations, primarily a brick facing material. There is a few buildings with green sandstone, and we're generally satisfied with what we're being shown here. This is the block of flats that's towards the A30, and through negotiations we've got the design of all of the houses really improved upon. You'll find arch windows here, you'll find brick banding throughout, and I have other features negotiated like a diamond in the flank elevation of this building just to break things up. And you'll see that in other buildings as well. This is one of the green sandstone buildings. You'll see that this has a strong window feature with lintels over it on the street scene, street elevation. And this pair of semis also fronts the A30. This also will be one of the buildings fronting the A30. Again, details of windows, porches, and materials. Again, as I mentioned, brick detailing improves the design for the street scene. And now I'm going to run through several slides that will show you the appearance of the houses generally. They have house types, and they've modified house types with either bricks, coloring, or tiles, or window features having arched or lintels. And I will just flip through these fairly quickly. And if anybody has a question or wants to see details, you can ask me to come back to them later. So you can see through those slides, the appearance of the dwellings is quite good. And we've received amended landscape drawings that have addressed the concerns by and large of your landscape officer. In particular, we will have a native hedge on the boundary being kept at a height of about 1.5 meters. That will allow those views over the hedge out to the distant Melbury Beacon, as we talked about before. They're reinforcing some of the planting that already exists outside of the site with a few trees, but not too many to allow informal views through the site where possible. We have a good density of trees along the house line. That'll help soften the appearance. It should be noted that the tree species collection or selection, pardon me, is very similar and has had regard to Shaftesbury Town Council's Appendix J, which gives a list of tree species that they'd like to see. You can also see on the plans we have planting details for some of the street trees to make sure those street trees survive. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, there were a couple on the other slide too. Those are highlighted or circled in blue. So overall, we're very satisfied, or I'm very satisfied, and from making a planning judgment on the landscaping matters, I'm satisfied with what I'm presented with. And the SUDS feature at the base of the site, we have a bespoke condition because the details on the SUDS feature haven't been finalized, and their landscape officer wasn't aware of the amount of water retention that was going to be in the pond. So we questioned whether the plant selection was correct or not. If it's dry, you need plants that'll survive through dry weather. If it's wet, you need plants that will survive that wet, saturated ground. So we've put a condition on for the SUDS planting. I would also note at this time there's a holding objection on the SUDS feature from the flood risk manager. However, the SUDS details are a matter of condition from the outline application. So no development is to proceed until those SUDS features are discharged by condition. And in the plans condition that we have that was originally in, I'm going to be asking that we remove some of those engineering drawings, and this matter will remain a matter of condition to be approved prior to development. Moving along, you have quite a bit of open space now that's going to be on the western boundary. And these are some of the highway plans and highway drawings I'll come back to in a minute and let Steve Savage expound upon. Refuse strategy, pedestrian cycle links. Part of the negotiations and discussions that I've had with the applicant was to put in renewables and car charging plan here in front of you shows just that. Each house, or not, yeah, each house will have some form of electric charge, either in the parking areas or directly to their house. They've also agreed to a condition prior to occupation for details of solar fittings. They won't be putting in solar panels, but putting in the infrastructure to allow any future residents to put it in for themselves, which can be half of the battle for a homeowner. This next slide shows you what that may look like for the car charging points. And you see here, they'll be putting in the electrics and running it either out to the garage or putting it to the front of the house. So running through the key planning matters that were discussed in the report, I trust you've all had an opportunity to read that. Layout and scale follows very much what was to be expected from the outline application. The appearance of the individual buildings and the general street scene, we think, is a very high quality. The landscaping features, we have addressed all the issues that have been raised by the landscape officer, and as a matter of a planning opinion, I'm satisfied with those. Highway safety we'll turn to in a second. Flood risk, I've already mentioned, we're going to pull that from the approved plans. And heritage concerns, you have the one listed building, the Mayo Farm, and that should not be affected at all by this development in terms of its setting or appearance. Other matters were with regard to noise, because they have a noise assessment with the report, and you will have noticed there were some conditions addressing those noise issues. And before I turn to the amended conditions, I'm going to double back to allow Steve Savage to discuss the highway matters. Steve, over to you.
Thank you very much. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rob, for putting the slide up. The position of the priority junction onto Higher Blandford Road was agreed at the outline stage, as were the off-site highway works, which you can see on the drawing before you. These off-site highway works provide a 3 metre wide adopted footway, which will link to the existing signal. So that's up from the northern extent of the site out onto the A30, and you can see it on the drawing there. It then takes a right angle, and the red element, which is shown in a larger scale on the bottom right hand corner of the plan, is the improvement which is required to actually link from that new footway stroke cycleway through to the existing toucan. The actual works to the A30 and the B3081 at the junction will require the realignment of the junction, which will provide for left turn movements only from the 3081 to the A30. It's always been a problem to turn right there. There'll also be a dedicated left turn lane provided from the A30 into the High Blandford Road, which will give from the High Blandford Road onto the A30 with a tighter radius. We've had issues with people driving too fast onto the A30 or perhaps not even stopping at all. And then you can see there'll be a new ghost island in the centre of the site, and then a left turn from the A30 into the B381 itself. So quite a radical change to the junction to make it a lot safer and a lot more efficient than it actually is at the moment. The lower left-hand corner drawing shows the visibility splays at the agreed access point, and you can just make out to the north of the junction, there's a pedestrian, an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing point, which is going to be implemented, which will basically be some tactile crossing points, just to ensure that the new residents have a safe means to cross to the footway immediately opposite.
That, Steve?
I mean, if you can just move down the screen to show the priority junction, the new junction to the site, Rob.
Try that.
That's the drawing, yes. So if you can just see the to the northwest of the new access, that's it. That's the uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, which then links through to the footway on the opposite side of the road. So the shortest distance we could get for the pedestrians to cross. Now, I'd reiterate that all of the off-site highway works were supported and agreed in condition by the planning inspector when he approved this site on appeal. With regards to the proposed estate road layout, I can confirm it meets with the requirements of our adopted highways policy and would be considered for adoption should an offer be made by the landowner to have these roads dedicated as highway maintainable at public expense. Car parking analysis shows that the on-site provision accords with council's guidance. Rob briefly showed you the swept path analysis, which confirms we can get the Dorset waste refuse vehicles freely around the site. So to sum up, Chair, the Highway Authority has no objection to the proposals before you, and happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Robert, back to you now then to finish with your final.
Okay, so Chair, we're recommending this for approval. However, we have updated the conditions. There are a few tweaks because we received amended plans after the report was published. So it's just changing the revision on a lot of these. And so what you have before you is, I think these are all revision H. So you will see these will be in the decision notice. I've asked for the deletion of the engineering drawings, which all relate to the SUDS feature. And then I'm just highlighting for you that the plan numbers that were referenced in some of the have also been updated.
Right.
All right. For completeness,
yeah.
We're recommending you to grant permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we have some representations that we are going to hear. We have two objectors: Shaftesbury Town Council, Melbury Abbas and Cannes Parish Council, and the applicant. So, Nicola, would you like to begin your second readings for us?
Okay, thank you. Karen Tippins against the application. There is already excessive house building that has taken place in Shaftesbury without any rollout of required infrastructure and without Dorset Council releasing much needed Section 106 developers' contributions for the community's infrastructure. The last small play area built was in 2015, valued at only 28,000 using Section 106 from Persimmon, and yet over 800 houses have been built in Shaftesbury. Open spaces have been left by developers and are unkempt with no equipment and have been in a dreadful state for years. Submissions to address the need for community facilities to Dorset Council appears to take too long to move forward and still no delivery of community facilities. Roads are not getting adopted by Dorset Highways, and again this goes on for years, if not a decade. Dorset Council officers have stated officially to a developer, Nilo Homes, there is an acute need for affordable housing in Shaftesbury for the controversial planning application 2/2020/0677/OUT. A Dorset Council officer stated 660 affordable houses needed, which locals believe to be a made-up figure by Dorset Council. There is no supporting evidence for any of these housing numbers supplied by Dorset Council to validate their authenticity. Also, the affordable houses are being transferred by developers to the company, Sovereign Housing, who don't appear to be giving these affordable houses to locals. Why are these affordable houses being built on valuable agricultural land right next to the AONB, and yet is no yet there is no visibility or justification or confirmation by Dorset Council that the houses really are going to locals. In the Dorset Council committee papers for this planning application, it states that there is an absence of a 5-year supply. Section 2.0 bullet point 3. Again, there are no statistics given to support this statement. I don't know what that is. Is that going to be 5th? I'm not sure. It says A30, 135 housing planning application appeal.
That's the
planning
site
appeal.
next door to this.
Okay. Dorset Council officers stated that Charlesbury housing is saturated and ahead of the curve, and yet for this planning application, Dorset officers are saying the opposite. The arguments appear on grant or refuse appears to flip-flop according to a desired outcome and not based on brownfield site, greenfield, sensitive area. Please stop approving developments for Charlesbury until you've proved to residents in Charlesbury that the required infrastructure has been put in place to be able to cope with a further population expansion of the town. In addition, please stop approving more houses until Dorset Council has a comprehensive renewable energy technology planning policy which mandates that developers must incorporate every possible and feasible technological solution possible for maximising the usage of renewable energy. It is a known policy gap by the Planning Committee, and there should be an action plan to address this key policy omission. Okay, this is Bernard Eade against the application. Whilst acknowledging that some positive changes have been made in response to earlier comments, there remain significant shortcomings. I therefore object to the above application for the following reasons. No overall sustainability concept nor strategy, contemporary measures for lower energy consumption, orientation of dwellings for solar gain, use of sustainable materials, recycling, stormwater management aren't addressed. Detrimental visual impact. There are no computer-based depictions of visual impact of the development and mitigating landscape measures from the AONB, nor from the A30 towards the chalk downland skyline. The development is within the setting of an AONB and detracts from it. There's no representation of outward views from the development towards the public open space nor AONB. 3. Inappropriate development character. The character is that of standalone, dense urbanisation in the isolated open field in Shaftesbury's rural hinterland. It does not appear landscape-led. 4. No suds. A conventional piped surface, conventional piped surface water drainage system is proposed, discharge into a large publicly inaccessible detention basin. The site plan lacks permeable paving, rainwater collection tanks, rain gardens, swales, shallow grass ditches, and soakage areas which could retard rapid surface water runoff and form an armature for the landscape structure threading through the development. 5. No logical planting strategy. There's no tree species and size hierarchy as such as large native trees, parkland, wetland, road and footway avenues, parking areas, domestic gardens. Similarly, there's no hedge hierarchy such as native outer perimeter, semi-native park and roadside edges and decorative species confined to domestic locations. Magnolia along the entrance road and hornbeam in the wetland area are inappropriate species. 6. Conflict with existing trees. 2 existing large oak in the A30 verge weren't shown in the proposals despite depiction on the site survey. 2 dwellings and combined footway cycleway immediately abut these and will jeopardise their survival. 7. Road and parking intrusion into open space. Access roads off the entrance road to dwellings and visitor parking intrude into the open space and views to the development from the C13. There is no screen planting such as hedging. 8. Dwellings immediately abut open space, a large section of the public open space perimeter is abutted by dwellings, walls and fences, whereas the outline scheme showed gardens and hedges. 9. Footways immediately abut entrance road. These appear superfluous unless they link to other footways and a road crossing. They create the impression of an over-engineered hard urban environment at the entrance. 10. No lighting details. In relation to dark skies policy, views from the AONB and how they interact with tree planting. 11. No maintenance zoning plans. Zones of maintenance operations should be defined on plan and distinction made between establishment and maturation maintenance, including replacement conditions in the event of plant failure. Long-term maintenance responsibilities should be defined. Okay. This is Shaftesbury Town Council. Whilst the applicant has made revisions to the architecture of the development, we continue to object to the overall design, being neither modern nor rural in appearance. Of equal concern is the material harm we feel this application will inflict on the rural nature of the approach to our historic town, and the fact that the site acts as a gateway to the Cranbourne Chase AONB from Charlesbury. We are also concerned that there is no provision for solar gain, either in the orientation of the houses or any proposed installations, to ensure a sustainable development. We would like to draw the committee's attention to the following policies. MPPF paragraph 12, achieving well-designed places, point 26, the creation of high quality, beautiful and sustainable buildings and places is fundamental to what the planning and development process should achieve. North Dorset Local Plan 2016, Policy 24, Design. Development should be designed to improve the character and quality of the area within which it is located. Proposals for development will be required to justify how the relevant aspects of the development form address the relevant design principles and standards set out in figures 10.1, 10.2 and 10.3 of this policy, and how the design responds to the local context. MPPF paragraph 13, protecting greenbelt land, 137. The government attaches great importance to greenbelts. The fundamental aim of greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. The essential characteristics of greenbelts are their openness and their permanence. Paragraph 14, meeting the challenge of climate change, flooding and coastal change. 152, the planning system should support the transition to a low carbon future in changing climate. It should help to shape places in ways that contribute to radical reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Planning for climate change. 153, plans should take a proactive approach to mitigating and adapting to climate change. 155, to help increase the use and supply of renewable and low carbon energy and heat. Plans should A, provide a positive strategy for energy from these sources. Paragraph 15, conserving and enhancing the natural environment. 174, planning policies and decisions should contribute and enhance the natural and local environment by A, protecting and enhancing valued landscapes, B, recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. NDLP Policy 3, climate change, B, be designed to make best use of solar radiation and passive cooling through the incorporation of passive solar design principles. Shaftesbury Neighbourhood Plan, and then there's a list of policies which are 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 12, 13, 14. We request full weight is given to the submissions by Dorset Council Senior Landscape Architect and Chartered Landscape Architect Bernard Eade. We wholly endorse their observations and objections. We request that no works of any kind should commence until objections raised in these submissions are mitigated by improved cladding proposals to the buildings and all landscaping issues have been addressed with revised plans. Okay, Melbury, Abbas and Cannes Parish Council. We refer to the above. We concur with the points that Charlesbury Town Council made concerning this application. Please note that approximately 50% of these proposed houses will actually be in the parish of Cannes and not Shaftesbury, and we want to ensure that the proportion of the Section 106 monies that will be applicable will be forwarded to this parish. Also, we wish to reiterate that the entrance for this proposed estate is onto a B road and not a major A road as indicated in the documentation. And this is Greg Allison, the Persimmon Homes applicant. Firstly, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Council for putting in the arrangements for this meeting to take place. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend your officers for the positive and proactive way in which they have dealt with this application. With regard to the merits of the proposal, this is a site that already benefits from outline planning permission granted at appeal for up to 55 dwellings. The outline planning application was supported by illustrative details informed by a LVIA that satisfied the inspector that would be no unacceptable harm to the nearby AOMBs. Had the inspector believed that the development of the site was not acceptable in a form similar to that illustrated, then permission would have been withheld. This is the starting point for the consideration of this application. In light of the findings of the inspector, the design of this scheme deliberately aligns the outline permission, including the retention of the views. This application proposes two-storey family housing in keeping with residential character of the area and has regard to its sensitive setting. The materials will taken into account those used in the vicinity. High quality brick will predominate with muted roof tiles to reduce the visual impact, particularly from long views. Stone-fronted properties are proposed in key locations to add interest and refer back to the historic character of Shaftesbury. Each property is to have high quality detailing and as can be seen from various revisions to the scheme, many amendments have been secured, including the provision of street trees, all to the overall betterment of the scheme. Every home will have its own garden and parking. High quality and resilient landscaping is proposed throughout the site. The submitted sustainability statement sets out the efficiencies of the houses above the building regulations baseline and details the infrastructure to be provided for electric car charging and solar PV panels. Our developments often utilise local tradespeople and contractors. The group's average private selling price is significantly lower than national average for newly built homes, and around 50% are sold to first-time buyers. The group's HBF customer satisfaction has been ahead of the 5-star threshold since January 2020, illustrating the continued success of the Persimmon Way programme, which aims to ensure we build good quality homes consistently. In summary, the overall benefits of the development, notably the contribution towards the Council's recognised housing needs, would outweigh any short-term impacts of the development. I hope that these brief comments are helpful in determining the application. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Nicola. Robert, there were a number of comments number of points that might have come out of there that you might like to comment on, and after that I'll go to Mike Garrity, who also wants to make a comment. Robert, okay. Points you'd like to pick up?
Yes, thank you. Chair, tell me, can you see my screen still?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, just so I know what I'm speaking to.
Yes.
Ms. Tippins had quite a few comments regarding community facilities. I'll let you know that there was a legal agreement with the outline planning permission to capture contributions towards the following: allotment contributions, community leisure and indoor sports facilities contributions, destination play contributions and maintenance for destination play, education contributions, formal outdoor sports contributions and maintenance, primary care services, and rights of way enhancement. So the development will be making its contribution towards these matters. Both Ms. Tippins and Shaftesbury Town Council and Khan seem to be fixated, if you'll excuse my expression there, on the principle of development. The principle of development is not for us to consider here today.
Right.
Outline planning permission was granted at a time when we had a very low housing land supply. And because of that grant of permission, these 55 homes feed into our current land supply number. So to try, if you go back on a decision, you're opening yourselves up for a load of trouble without question. So the principle of development was accepted by the planning inspectorate, and I believe that decision was an addendum to this report.
Well, yes.
Renewables, as you know, renewables, the applicant has agreed to conditions to ensure that charge points and solar infrastructure are put into the dwellings. The landscaping comments by Mr. Bernard, I think it is. As I said, I've run through the list of points raised by our landscape officer, and these have been addressed more than adequately, in my own opinion, with the exception of the SUDS feature, which again, we've taken that out of the decision because of what I've said previously. The pedestrian paths, we did show a plan of that. The highway engineers have raised no particular concerns. I'm putting it on the screen again now for you to have another look at those elements, especially here at the northern end of the site towards Salisbury Road. Public footpaths being put in. That was part of the 106 or the 278. Steve can comment if necessary on those. The elements on landscaping, as I've mentioned previously, although Mr. Bernard brought this up, something about magnolia trees, those have been removed as a request from our landscape officer. We're satisfied that the trees in the street scene will survive. When they put in street trees, they look at the volume of soil that's around the trees. And so if you can see my cursor circling this one here, you've got a footpath in the road, but on the other side of the footpath is more grass soil, so to speak, and they calculate the volume accordingly. So, but they look both what's immediately available to it, but they'll also give reference to what's adjacent to it. Like this one here is adjacent to a back garden area. And so the roots are expected to be able to traverse a little ways and survive. Plus we have the condition that anything that doesn't survive will be replanted. And I will stop there. If there are any further questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Mike Garrity, you wanted to come in. Yes,
thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, just a very quick point of clarification. Some reference was made in the representations about this green belt and the impact on Greenbelt. Just wanted to clarify that this is not, Greenbelt is a very specific policy tool that has to be designated through local plans. And in Dorset only has one that actually encircles the Bournemouth Christchurch Pool conurbation in the southeastern Dorset area. This area is not covered by Greenbelt policy, so Greenbelt policy does not apply in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have questions now from Councillor Cook and then Councillor Rideout and then Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions first. Reference was made to the AONB. I know this application doesn't sit within the AONB, but can we just confirm, or can Robert confirm the distance to the AONB? Do we have any way of showing that on the screen?
Yes,
the
thank you.
Chase AONB.
Chair, may I address that question straight away?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so one of the first slides I had shown, my apologies, I didn't point it out. It should be on your screen right now.
It is, yes.
And these blue dots are the AONB. Chair, if I can be so bold, I'm going to give a little tutorial on the setting of AONBs right now, and I'll make it quick because can you see me? I can't see you all. My screens are filled up.
We can see you and we can see your screen.
Okay, so if you see my hand in front of me, yeah? If you imagine my hand is what is the AONB.
Yes.
Okay, but the spaces in between my fingers are not. So
right.
That's much like the escarpments of the Cranbourne Chase AONB. So you have it drawn higgledy-piggledy, and these bits in here, you might consider to be the setting of the AONB because they can be viewed from within the AONB when you look across to it, yeah? But when you get stuff out here, that's not considered to be part of the setting of the AONB, depending on how close. I mean, you have to be reasonable. But the other thing that we have to consider and the inspector considered, not us, but the inspector also considers what's the context of the site. When you view this site, it's a puzzle piece. It's fitting into the rest of the development. So it doesn't contribute to the AONB or the setting of the AONB like a pocket over here would do. So that's something to think about when you think about the setting of the AONB is, can you see it within when you look across to the other part of it? And what's the context of it? All of Shaftesbury at one point, in my own opinion, could have been considered part of the setting of the AONB. When you look at it on a big map, a big scale, all of Shaftesbury could have been part of the setting of the AONB, but clearly it's not. Things have moved on, things have developed, and this is the context of the site that we're dealing with today. Thank you, Chair.
That's helpful, thank you. Tim, does that?
Yeah, no, that's helpful, thank you. Now, coming to the detail of the buildings themselves, the houses themselves, reference was made earlier about some of the buildings being faced in sandstone, and I did look at see references within the report to key buildings that these were being called. Can you identify on the plans, A, how many, and B, exactly where on those plans they are located, please?
Yes, Chair, there are 4 of them, and if you can see my cursor, I'm circling this one here in the middle.
Yeah.
So when you drive into the site, you'll be seeing that.
Yeah.
And then there's the other 2 are in the street elevation of Salisbury up here at the north.
Right.
So those are key locations, I would say. And if I may, second. So that's what they would be looking like for on the street scene. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Robert. And now turning to the landscaping, are you or are our officers happy that all the objections raised by the senior landscape architect, Dorset's senior landscape architect, have been addressed, and these plans have changed in respect of the objections that had been raised before? Please.
Robert.
Chair, yesterday afternoon I had the last minute meeting because I was still not satisfied and my landscape officer was not satisfied. So we had that 11th hour meeting yesterday, and this morning I was up extra early preparing this lovely presentation for you all, feeding in the amended drawings and making things just right. I am satisfied that the points that she has raised have been adequately addressed. And we also agreed yesterday to take out the SUDS feature because we didn't think that could be completed in time, and there were other issues with the technical details. So yes, I am satisfied that they have been addressed adequately for my purposes. And as I mentioned, these drawings that I showed you today are what was received late last night. I mentioned the magnolias in the street scene; those have been removed. Here on this plan, you see retained grassland and a native hedge to be planted, to be maintained at the height. That was another one of her comments. The western elevation of the houses, we wanted some more trees in there to give it more of a softening, so it wasn't just stilted of a single line of trees. And also to break up the planting beds to make it look a bit more natural, so it's a bit wavy here. Yes, Councillor, Chair, I am satisfied that the landscape matters have been adequately addressed.
That's splendid. Thank you very much. Councillor Cook, you're happy with that?
Thank you for the questions. Yeah, I appreciate time to make comments.
Yes.
After all other questions have been answered.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Rideout, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, Sir Robert, please. First of all, lighting. Is there any proposed lighting on this development? Secondly, with reference to landscaping, looking through, it's also very small. Got a job to see some of it, but I've tried to print off a plan. But there are trees dotted throughout the development, and you have assured us that they are the appropriate trees for where they are, the positioning, because they're right outside the front elevation of many of the dwellings, which I know from experience in Gillingham can cause quite a few problems as years go on. And I was wondering, actually, looking at the condition 5, I was wondering if we could extend the maintenance, if any trees fell within 5 years, to 10 years, because I've seen what happens on developments so similar to this one in Gillingham, where the trees are just abandoned basically, and they're growing through their they're just growing through their railings that are around them, and they fail. So I wonder if we could make that condition a little bit more robust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert, can we take the tree point first and then come to lighting? Is there any reason why we couldn't extend that condition for 10 years? Would that be reasonable?
No, there isn't. No, there isn't. And if they don't like it, they can appeal it, and I can have the discussion with them. We've been working positively with them on these things,
yes, and I know you have.
Yes. My opinion is, and it's only my opinion until I speak to them and get the confirmation. But I think we can. I've done it very rarely, but if we can do it on agreement, that's fine.
I think that would be helpful. Landscaping is such a lot of work has gone into this landscaping plan, not just at 2 o'clock this morning, but I know for a very long time, a lot of work. And so the extra 5 years on the condition to make it all survive seems worthwhile.
Chair, I'd like to know. Chair, I'd like to know, is that a deal breaker? If they don't agree to it, do you want to refuse the application and bring it back?
What do you think, Belinda? Not a deal breaker?
No,
not a deal breaker. No, it's something we would like you to pursue.
Okay.
It's not a deal breaker. Can you comment on lighting?
On lighting, yes, I think we have a condition to agree the details of lighting. So they are aware of the dark skies designation for Cranbourne Chase, and I think we have it as a condition.
Right.
Plus, with the street trees, and people often worry about street trees not surviving, we did have detailed conversations with the highway engineers, and they reassured us that the street trees being proposed would survive. They wouldn't be removed as a section 38 or something to that effect. Right. Steve can correct me if getting things
Chairman,
wrong there.
Sorry,
yes,
Chairman, can I just butt in? I couldn't see a condition for lighting. That's why I was asking. I may have missed it. I may have missed it, but if you could check.
Sorry, can you just give me a moment, please? I do have the report.
Yes.
Open on a different screen. It was in the appeal decision.
Right.
It was
All right.
condition 17 of the appeal decision. It says, prior to occupation of any dwelling, an external lighting strategy shall be submitted to and agreed by the local planning authority.
That's
Right.
fine.
Good.
Thank you.
Happy with that? Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Good. Councillor Heatley, is yours a question or a comment? You'll go ahead either
Yes,
way.
it's
Yeah.
a question.
Good. Right.
Robert, you and I had a little exchange about the plan of renewables and charging points, because when I looked at it, I couldn't find any renewables on the roofs. Now turns out that what is actually going to be provided is fittings for renewables, what you referred to as solar infrastructure, which is disappointing, but I know we cannot enforce these things. However, a couple of questions about it. Does it include the cabling? And that's quite important, because cabling is so much easier to do when you're building the building than afterwards. And secondly, slightly more sinister, do the fittings effectively oblige the resident subsequently to buy maybe a particular kind of solar panel, or maybe only a limited range of solar panels? Could there be just a wee element of restricting competition going on here?
No, Chair, let me jump right in on that one.
Yes,
actually,
please
it's the exact opposite. The reason they only want to put in the infrastructure is because the market is so diverse. And imagine you drive one type of car, and that has a charge for their car. So your neighbor drives a different car, it's electric, but they've got a different charge point. The market isn't standardized yet. And so what they're putting in and what we've shown, they showed us this example, and we have this as a condition, so we will see the details of, they're implying that the cabling is going into the garage, it's coming to the house, and I will be expecting the same sort of cabling up into the roof for a solar fitting. So it's, as I said, I think it's just the opposite. It's a bit of saving money on their side, I think, but they also have a justified position in saying the market isn't standardized, and we don't want to, for both the charge points and for solar, put in something that ties people up.
I certainly, I understand the position as far as the car charging is concerned. It's a complete nightmare, the different systems. But I mean, just from a practical point of view, if you're putting in a fitting, which is some kind of girder that you're going to screw solar panels onto, it's going to be of particular dimensions and so on and so forth. And I am concerned that thereby you restrict the choice of solar panels you may put on. I don't know. I'm just think it is a possibility that we ought to worry about.
I accept your comments, and I will agree with you on those. Until I get the details from that condition, I won't be able to comment. My apologies. Okay. I don't know enough myself about the market on solar. That is.
No, okay. It's an interesting point you read, and it was one of the questions I asked Brian. Is this a good thing to do or a bad thing? And I think I'm satisfied that on balance it's probably quite a wise approach to take. Councillor Val-Pothecary, you're wanting to make a comment, Councillor Pothecary. Go ahead.
Yes,
sorry, Val, can I just interrupt you? Can I interrupt you, Val? Councillor Cook has wanted a question on this same subject. Would you mind if I brought him in first?
Not at all.
Councillor Cook, you have a solar question.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Val. Actually, on the solar, I noticed that in a couple of the comments that were made in objection to this application, the orientation of the buildings themselves was brought into question. Now, from a personal point of view, my own house, we've had two people round from solar panel companies who gave us the unfortunate news that our house, the way the roof is configured, it is not suitable for solar panels at all. And I was just wondering, can you tell us, is the orientation and the roof structure sufficient to allow the applicant to make this wonderful gesture? And it is a wonderful gesture, let's face it. We haven't had these solar panels have been avoided as we've seen in past meetings. Does the infrastructure that is proposed stack up against the applicant's brave decision to do this?
Robert.
Chair, looking at the house designs, my own limited knowledge is 30 degrees is the ideal optimum angle for solar panels. A little bit more, a little bit less, they still achieve their purpose of generating electricity. The other point being raised was orientation, and I did have a quick count, and 22 of the 50 buildings here, 22, nearly half of the buildings have a south-facing aspect. If you can look at my cursor here, that's what I'm calling a south-facing aspect. And many of the others have just east-west. And whilst it's not ideal, it doesn't preclude them from having solar panels. They can still put solar panels on here. They just won't be as efficient. And maybe this is something we all need to learn as we go forward. But if you changed all of those roof ridges to where they were gabled ends, it might look a bit more imposing, and your street scene is going to look a lot different. But as far as this layout, as I said, you've got almost half that have a strong southern aspect, and others that potentially have they have a strong east or west aspect that won't preclude them from having some solar. It's not a passive house design, but it's not expected to be either.
No, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Apothecary, you wanted to make a comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As has been stated a couple of times, this has already got outline consent, which was given on appeal. So that is a given to anybody listening that doesn't quite understand the system. We can't change the fact that consent has been given to build on this site. I would just like to point out things that I've been impressed with, frankly. I'm reassured that the roads will be delivered to an adoptable standard. I think the trees are a very welcome feature. I'm pleased with the recommendation for additional landscaping and the fittings for renewables, which is a nod to green energy at least. I particularly like 30% affordable housing, and actually I think the whole site is a very attractive design. I'd like to compliment our planning officer for all his efforts. On the back of that, I would like to propose approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Apothecary. Is there someone who would like to second this? Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second. I really was delighted to see that every house is going to have its own charger. I mean, I don't think I've seen this in any application that's come before us. And I just think that's fantastic. We're going in the right direction. And I have to say, if Councillor Les Fry was on this committee right here, right now, he'd be clapping. So I am delighted to second. Thank you.
Yes, good. Thank you very much. I have no further comments. So unusually, I would like to make a comment on this application, which I don't normally do. I have to say, I think that what we have an example now here is a design and a layout that is the result of really hard work by our officers in that negotiation with the developers to get the best possible outcome. This planning application, this site has been under discussion for a very long time. The 55 houses were agreed at appeal, so that, as has been said, is given. But I think this is a delightful outcome from that negotiation. The imaginative use of the site, so that we've got all that green space to secure the views of Melbury down. That's a generous use of that site. I think the trouble that Robert Lennis has gone to secure really attractive buildings with all of the use of materials and the arched windows and the various features in the brickwork, you know, I'm pretty sure that wasn't there in the opening gambit, and that's all the result of good negotiation on behalf of the people of Dorset. And I think that the landscaping, again, Robert has told us that he was been working till late last night to sort this out, and I do think that setting aside the fact that I know there were many people who would rather not see any housing on this site, I think we have to acknowledge that this is a good application directly as a result of the effort of our officers, and I would just like the opportunity to say that, because I think it's a very much better site, very much better design than we could have been offered on this site, and so that's my feeling about this site. And as I say, I don't generally comment. If I have no further comments,
Chairman.
Sorry, could we have? Yes.
I'm sorry, I did ask at the beginning of
sorry, you're not in
this
yes,
to actually be able to make some comments first before other people.
Please do. Yes, we've had go ahead.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with much of what's been said about the appearance of this site. I do take the point that this development will go ahead on this site anyway. That was put forward by the planning inspector, and that has to be absolutely adhered to. However, if you read the planning inspector's report, his main issue 7, second bullet point on page 58 of our agenda, he considers the effect of the proposal on the open countryside and rural character of the area. And in paragraph 21 on page 60, he states that the site therefore holds an important value as part of this landscape by providing a rural setting to the nearby developed area of Charlesbury. It follows then that the design of the houses should be exemplary in my view. On page 44, the applicant concludes that the proposed design and materials are considered to be good. Strong window design with brick arches and lintels, etc., which the officer, Robert Lennis, has actually done some very good work in trying to enhance the offering that the developers put forward. However, stock designs such as the Kielder, the Charnwood, the Mayfair, the Knightsbridge, they don't shout Dorset at all. Bearing in mind that this will be the first development to the south that any visitors will see when they come into the county. This isn't about Charlesbury, it's not about North Dorset, it's actually about the county of Dorset itself. That the first impressions that many visitors will see are 2 green sandstone houses. My view is that, and if you listen to the senior landscape architect, she commented that the proposed street scene A depicts a basic suburban terrace and semi-detached properties that lack the status and quality required by their position lining Shaftesbury Road. North Dorset Plan Policy 18, Shaftesbury Neighbourhood Plan policies that have been referenced, they all reference the design and heritage of any development, and to have two sandstone faced houses on the frontage, I think is woefully inadequate. I think one sandstone building as you drive into the development again is woefully inadequate. we've got to find a way of softening the urban or the urbanization as you drive in and as you drive down the C13 as well. My view would be that each and every house should be of a heritage quality, because this isn't this is outside the settlement boundary. I know, as the planning inspector has stated, the development will go ahead here, but it's outside the settlement boundary. And the inspector himself recognised that the urbanising effect of the proposal would have a detrimental impact on the rural character and appearance of the area and cause limited harm to the setting of the Cranbourne Chase West Wiltshire AONB. What we should do now, in my view, we can't stop development happening. We can't make too many conditions to actually prevent this application going ahead. So my view would be to say to the developer, we refuse this application because of the woefully inadequate design of the overall development, and say, go away, come back with a proposal that makes this look heritage, rural setting. I think as it stands, the development is not in keeping with the area it is sitting in. North Dorset Plan Policy 18, the Charlesbury Neighbourhood Plan policies, it goes against these design and heritage aspects. I do welcome the design or the inbuilt vehicle charging points, but my overall view is that, can these houses meet net zero carbon requirements as set out by Building Better, Building Beautiful? I don't think so. These are stock houses. We don't want to say to the visitors of this county, this is what you get when you come to Dorset. And I don't think the residents would be as happy as if they were in green sandstone fronted, gentle houses. So I know there's a proposal on the table to accept. I cannot agree to that as it stands. I think there are too many design and heritage failures in this design that I just can't support it.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further comments here. We have had a proposer, Councillor Apothecary, and a seconder, Councillor Carol Jones, to support this, the officer recommendation to approve this with the conditions as amended and as detailed to us at some length by Robert in his update sheet, and with the can I just clarify to Councillors Apothecary and Jones, this is with the extending the landscape condition from 5 years to 10. That's what you're proposing, is it?
Yes, please, Chairman.
And yes, please, Chairman. Yes,
good.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. I think we're all clear now, and I'm going to put this now to a minded to vote. When I call your name, would you just indicate briefly that you've heard the discussion, you've been present throughout, heard the discussion, and whether you're for or against this proposal to approve. Councillor Cook.
Present and taking all part in the discussion, against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall.
Present, heard everything, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Heatley.
Present, and I've heard the debate and I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Jones.
Present throughout and voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stella Jones.
Present and for.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Present and for.
Councillor Val Apothecary.
Present and for.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Present throughout and for.
That's lovely. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. That is a minded to vote in favour. I will now turn to Mike Garrity for his decision. Mike, would you tell us your decision, please, in the light of our minded do?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me just, yes, sorry about that. I was just clicking onto my screen. You can see me now, presumably,
Yes,
can you?
yes,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can confirm that I have taken the officer's presentation, the representations and the committee's minded to decision into account. My decision is that this application will be granted subject to the conditions as set out and agreed in the debate. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Members, we have, it's now 12:24. We have one more application to take before lunch. Can I have a quick view in the chat bar whether you would like a comfort break now or like to press on?
I'm happy to press on, Chairman.
Somebody's happy to press. Anybody not happy to press on? I'm not hearing anybody. Good. We will then press on if that's with the agreement of the committee. Sorry, I should have asked Robert because it's your show. So we're now moving on to our next agenda item, which is an application for 40 dwellings on land south of Newlands Manor House in Charlton Marshall. This one is new to us. We haven't seen this one before. Robert, this is your presentation. Would you like to show us your slideshow?
I would be delighted, Chair.
Thank you.
Let me know when you see that screen, please.
I will do. Yes, we can see it now. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillors, this application was granted permission a few years ago. The original application was for 55 dwellings, but by condition in discussions of what the site could support, it was conditioned to be 40 dwellings only. And unusually at that time, unusually that outline application was just for the principal. All matters were reserved. So as you see on the screen before you, this application gives details on the big five: appearance, landscaping, layout, scale, and access. Here's the proposed development site. It's towards the northeastern boundary of Charlton Marshall. This slide shows you some of the constraints with the site. There aren't many. You have a public footpath, which is the pink. That's a bridleway, the green, that line. Public footpath across the road. This blue dotted land is the conservation area of Charlton Marshall. So you see the site does abut the northern extent of that, and there are some listed buildings, but those are down the street and don't have much impact to or from the site. Quite a bit of detail was spent at the outline application about flood risk. On this slide, you see the big red dot is our site. To the northeast, I'm sorry, northeast is the flood zone for the Stour. That is flood zones 1 and 2, or pardon me, 2 and 3. So it comes close to the site, but technically the site is in flood zone 1, and your flood risk manager at the time had no objection to the proposal. He felt then, and still does now, that the drainage for the site can be achieved adequately. This drawing before you is the proposed site layout. Your conservation officer and myself have had pre-application discussions and then discussions during the application with the applicant, and we are satisfied that the layout and appearance is good. The landscape officer as well had no objections to the very first submission, though did suggest some amendments, which you see before you. So the applicant has worked positively with us to address our concerns with regards to landscaping as well. And the landscape officer has no objection, subject to some conditions which are attached to the end of this report and presentation. These are some more detailed drawings with regard to the planting strategy for the site. You'll see this is the suds feature, and you're going to be having quite a few trees planted in there. And more importantly for the site is currently, they were intending the site along this boundary with the Bournemouth Road, the A35, has leylandi, very tall, very big leylandi along most of that frontage. That's going to be removed and replaced with some more native species, and we're generally happy about that. Moving on to so landscape's fine, layout's fine, details of appearance. Here I'm going to show you most of the houses that have been supplied details. Brick built buildings, you see arched windows, chimney features. We were satisfied from the get-go that design is of a high quality. It is going to be providing 40% affordable housing, as I should have mentioned earlier, but I'll mention now. These are some street scenes. Scale, 2-story in height, another reserved matter, except for, of course, your ancillary buildings, which are garages, typically single-story in height. We have a few engineering drawings, which I'll come back to in a minute and turn over to Steve. I think I'll do that now, Steve, and then I'll get on to the key points. So Steve, over to you on the engineering layout. Oh,
yeah.
Steve, over to you.
Through you, Chair.
Yes, carry on, Steve.
The position of the junction that you can see on that drawing, the junction onto the A350 was agreed at the outline stage and provides the necessary visibility displays. When you're coming from the Blandford St Mary direction, you go just past the 2 bus stops. There's one on either side of the carriageway, and go a little bit further along, and then the speed limit changes down to 30 miles per hour. But the visibility displays relate to the approach vehicle speeds. The consent, previous consent required the provision of a 2-metre wide footway along the frontage of the site. So it's linking from the bus stop on the same side of the development all the way along the A350 down to the Bellmouth junction with Tannery Court to the south. So that's a brand new 2-metre wide footway. On the opposite side of the road on the A350, members may be aware there's a very narrow 1-metre wide footway. So we feel this is a big plus in terms of pedestrian provision. We have, though, looked for an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, i.e. some tactile points to be provided in close proximity to that junction, and we need to agree that with the developer as and when they carry out the necessary access works. Now, the layout that you can see meets with the requirements of Manual for Streets. It provides a low-speed environment which should be suitable for use by all road users. What you can't see on that is that by design, we don't want vehicle speeds to be greater than 20 miles per hour, so we keep sections of highway very short as a consequence. The package or the parcel you can see with the salmon pink and the yellow just to the south of the first spine road, we're going to have a speed table there to keep vehicle speeds low, but that's all been agreed with us. The plan that Rob brought up the screen, I think it was just after this one, showed the swept path analysis for a refuse vehicle, because you'll probably note that if you just look at the diagram in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a bit of a chicane for vehicles to get around. Okay. So we wanted to be certain that the refuse vehicle could approach that in either direction and it wouldn't be obstructed by parked cars. So you can see, you can just about make out that we've got parking spaces directly opposite or coming out onto that chicane bend. there we go, it's back again, which will prevent people from parking in locations where we don't want them to, but the carriageway is sufficient width that visitor parking is provided for, as is the on-site car parking for each individual plot. So I can confirm that should the landowner offer to dedicate this estate road as a highway maintainable at public expense, we would consider them for public adoption. So having said all of that, Madam Chair, I can confirm the Highway Authority has no objection to the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Robert, back to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Moving along then to the key planning matters. As I said at the beginning, you had the 5 main reserve matters. Access, Steve just told you, is acceptable. The layout, appearance, and scale of the design, I'm satisfied with, as well as your conservation officer. Landscaping details, we are satisfied with. I'm satisfied with. Your landscape officer is also satisfied with those. Heritage assets, again, your conservation officer is satisfied that the proposal is acceptable in terms of heritage with the conservation area to the south. And other matters such as neighbor amenity, there were some concerns by local residents of the footpath being designed in and coming out onto, sorry, I'm going to get here.
Yes.
This footpath, if you can see my pointer here.
Yes.
Through the public open space, they have a footpath coming out onto gravel lane. And some have raised concerns about that. I cannot see why that would be objectionable, because they're not coming into directly across from anybody's house. So there's no noise, there's really no overlooking or loss of privacy because of this footpath. And what this sort of footpath does is it knits the development into the existing fabric that's there. I find it a very positive feature to have that. And so that has remained. And then the other neighbor concerns with those to the house, nothing materialized because they have a strong boundary there. And subject to some amendments of the conditions. Now, I have to apologize yet again on conditions. I have a few things that I need to point out. And it's because I noticed that some of the condition numbers, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but my report showed condition numbers were misnumbered. Let me start with condition 2, the plans. In discussion with Steve, the engineering layout that you saw today should take place instead of this access junction, which is listed. So that will be deleted, access junction layout. The reason I'm deleting that is because it shows an old layout to the site, which I don't want to confuse anybody at any time in the future. And the engineering layout holds all the details that we need for access, and it has the correct layout. So that's why I'm changing condition 2. Then my next point here, the condition numbering is off. Please note, and my apologies, this is all down to me. I should have triple checked it. Conditions in your report say 6, 7, 8, and 8. Those should say 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then the corrected condition 6 needs to read here. You need to change that 5 to a 4. I feel a fool for having to tell you all that, and I am sorry. But despite all of that, I'm recommending this subject to conditions for approval. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Given that you've already told us how hard you were working on the previous application, I think we will forgive a little bit of typographical inexactitude. We've heard from Steve, so we now have a representation to hear from Charlton Marshall Parish Council, which will be read for us by Nicola.
Okay. The Parish Council have no comments or objections in respect of the design and layout of the proposed development, but note that no detail has been provided in respect of heights of the proposed houses, and it is not clear how visible they will be in the landscape, nor what their relative height would be to any new planting in the first few years. There are, however, concerns around the location of the entrance exit. The high volume of traffic used in this major road, the A350, residents in the area already report difficulties turning out of driveways onto the road. The volume of traffic will be increased again by the Bellway development. Speed of traffic through the major part of the A350 through the village is 30 miles per hour. The community speed watch team regularly record vehicles travelling at much higher speeds. This site is at the limit of 30 miles per hour, and therefore vehicles approaching from Blandford on the site side will be approaching at greater speed. Due to the high volume and speed of traffic, any pedestrian crossing consideration should be of a pedestrian controlled type to ensure vehicles stop in both directions, particularly for the safety of children needing to cross this road. The Parish Councillor were impressed with the reports from Dr. Weir, Senior Conservation Officer, and Catherine Van Etten, Senior Landscape Architect, and would endorse KVE's comments. And that's it.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Two main comments there we might, Robert, you might comment. The height of the buildings.
Yes, Chair. I showed you drawings of the individual buildings. And also, I'll show you one right now. Can you see that?
Yes.
So they're 2-story in height.
Right.
Ancillary buildings are going to be garages, a 1-story in height. When we look at it as officers, and we have both conservation and landscape looking at it, we're taking account of what it's going to look like in the future. And there may be, you know, the first year change is always going to be stark. People are going to look at it and say, oh my goodness, what have you done? But we're satisfied with the landscaping details, and that's what your landscape officer is commenting upon. And again, that's also what myself and the conservation is talking about with design and appearance and scale. Chair, I think that covers that. The other comment was about highway matters. That's for Steve.
Steve, just, I mean, you've answered this already, but just to reinforce the question of the access point and the pedestrians crossing the road.
Certainly. Well, the uncontrolled crossing, which isn't shown on the plan, the intention is we want to get a safe crossing point for pedestrians from not only this new development, from the existing residents of Charlton Marsh who are on the eastern side of the carriageway, to be able to cross to the bus stop, which will then allow them to travel further north on public transport. So it'll be located, probably I would suggest, halfway between the Belmouth junction you can see there and the southbound bus stop, as it were, but it'll be optimised to maximise the visibility, etc. I agree with the Parish Council that vehicle speeds are often higher than the speed limit, and they are on most roads in Dorset. Unfortunately, we can't legislate for bad driving behaviour. People should drive in accordance with the highway code, and we're probably all guilty of not strict adherence, but you should be decelerating as you come down to a 30-mile-per-hour limit. And the visibility displays at this access are for 40 miles per hour traffic in both directions. So they have not only the statutory 79 metres, which allows for a safe stopping distance, but it's got a factor of safety obviously built into that because it's substantially higher than that identified by the highway code. So it's a valid point for the Parish Council to make, but it isn't directly related to the development and its safety impact. So we couldn't recommend a refusal for argument's sake on the fact that people already speed on the adjacent highway. So hopefully that's answered that.
No, wouldn't it be a wonderful world if planning committees could stop speeding? But alas, no. I have a question now coming in from Councillor Apothecary. Val.
Thank you, Chairman. It is regarding this crossing, actually, the pedestrian crossing. I do support the parish council's view on this. Could we please condition that we have a button control crossing?
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
I think, Councillor Pothcary, we've got certain criteria that you have to satisfy to justify a pedestrian crossing facility. I mean, it's basically a technical approach which looks at the amount of pedestrian traffic and the need to cross. We saw this as not essential to the development. We felt that it was a good plus, if you like, a benefit for the community as a whole. My response to your question would be no, I don't think that we could justify a toucan crossing, for example, at that location, allowing for the amount of pedestrian traffic which is going to be generated from this development on its own. There is no justification for it, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor Rideout, you have, I know, Councillor Rideout, you have a comment. Go ahead, please.
I do have a comment, Chairman. Thank you. After listening to the report, I read it through thoroughly. Do you know, I'm really quite happy with this proposal. I think it's good design, good layout. It's got good links, pedestrian. All in all, I think I'm very happy with it. And also, I think I read somewhere there's some recharge plans for all the dwellings, recharge points. So again, that's a plus. So I'd be happy to propose we approve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just confirm that you are proposing with the conditions as amended by Robert?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
thank
of
you.
course. Yeah.
I see Councillor Carol Jones.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, yeah, it's a nice development, and 40% affordable, goes way above. High standard, like it. I'm very happy to second, Chair.
Right, I have a proposer and a second, and again with the conditions as amended by Robert. I have a proposer and a seconder. I have no other comments coming up in my comment bar. I have no wish to rush you, but no, I think we're probably ready to go for your minded to vote on this one then. Ladies and gentlemen, when I call your name, if you would please indicate that you've heard the discussion and whether you are for or against. Councillor Cook.
I've heard all the discussion for.
Councillor Hall.
Present, heard it all, for.
Councillor Heatley.
Yes, I've been present. I've listened to everything. I'm for.
Councillor Carol Jones.
Present throughout, for.
Councillor Stella Jones.
Present, for.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Present throughout, for.
Val Pothcary.
Present and for.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Present throughout and for.
Well, there we are. We're minded to adopt that one. Can I now turn to Mike Garrity, Head of Planning, for your decision, please, Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can confirm that I have taken the officer's presentation, the representations and the committee's minded to decision into account. And my decision is that the application will be granted subject to the conditions as set out. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings us a bit ahead of time, well done, to our lunch break. The committee will now go into recess, and we will reconvene promptly at 2 o'clock, where we will pick up where we left off. Thank you all very much for being here this morning, and to Stella Jones, who I know has had to give her apologies for this afternoon's meeting, so we will make a note of that. Yes, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this morning's deliberations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Chairman.